By our constitutional design, Parliament is in some sense the foremost institution of accountability and governance. So, other than making laws, another primary job that Parliament has is to make sure that the government is held accountable for all its actions. In addition, they are also supposed to make sure that all financial spending of the government is accounted for properly and stock taken afterwards, not just the sanctioning the budget, but also post budget, looking at the CAG reports, seeing that the money is spent properly. Parliament does this through various mechanisms. One, there's a question hour every day. Used to be the first hour, now Rajya Sabha has shifted that, but that's 1 hour where MPs get to ask ministers questions about functioning of the ministries, and the ministers have to answer. And an interesting part of question hour is that for every oral question, there's a supplementary question allowed for which the ministers don't have prior notice, so they have to have a mastery over the ministry. A second and possibly even more important aspect or mechanism by which accountability is done is through various parliamentary committees. So every department has a departmental standing committee attached to it, and those committees can look into various issues. For example, there's a standing committee which looked into, in urban affairs, which looked into the work of Delhi Metro Corporation. So they look into various of these issues. We also have the financial committees. For example, the Public Accounts Committee, which has been in the news recently thanks to the 2G issue. So they look at all the CAG reports and examine the major recommendations of the CAG and try to find out wherever the CAG has pointed out that there are problems, why those problems came up, and come out with a report, and that's tabled in Parliament. That's an extremely important role. The question comes now, is Parliament doing all its mandated job in a very proper way and holding the government accountable? And in some sense you can see that maybe they could do better. For example, a lot of the so-called scams that we see don't come to our notice through parliamentary work. They come through the work of the media or other NGOs, or someone else brings them up. Very often, Parliament is unable to even follow through these issues to the conclusion to find out where the gaps are. And in some cases, due to political reasons, Parliament even, I would take a strong word, abdicates its responsibility. For example, a very recent example, the budget session this year, typically all the ministries' demands for grants are referred to standing committees which look into them before passing the budget. This time, because there were elections in certain states, Parliament decided not to go through that process. So we have a 11 lakh crore budget which has been sanctioned without any committee looking through the budgets and saying that fine, go ahead with the spending. So that's an issue. Now, why is this happening? Why is Parliament unable to do? And that's a very important issue to address. Several reasons. Firstly, if you go back to what I said earlier, Parliament versus, in some sense, the legislature versus the executive. That is the tension. And legislature is supposed to oversee the work of the executive. But if you see the relative strengths in the sense of staffing, ability to do that, clearly it is the balance is against the legislature. There is no research staff either for individual MPs or for Parliament as a whole other than the library referral service or for the committees. Committee staff typically is part of the secretariat and they do a good job at managing logistics. Library does a good job as a referral library, but there are no experts attached to these committees or the library who can actually probe deeply into issues and bring them up to the notice of members. And that we think is extremely important to invest in so that Parliament can do its job better. A second serious issue is what are the incentives for MPs to actually invest their time and resources to go into this particular aspect. Clearly, I can see again at least two reasons why there's not too much incentive. First, for re-election, very few of us ever ask or ever track what MPs did in Parliament. The issues that come up, if you see in election campaigns, are never on what happened in Parliament, but they are either typically local factors or factors like caste or some other issue. This never parliamentary work. And secondly, even if an MP were interested in something and many of them are interested and are sincere, but if what they want to raise, or if there is a vote and they want to question the party line, the anti-defection law doesn't permit them to do that. So the question is, what is the incentive really for MPs to invest their time and other resources in parliamentary work, holding the government accountable? And really, there is very little there. And it's been surprising to me why so many MPs actually spend so much time at these things, because A, it does not count for re-election at all. We never ask, typically citizens never ask at the time of an election campaign what MPs did in Parliament, how many questions they asked, what were the questions, were they relevant, did they take part in committee work, etc. It's more about other aspects, typically like what did you do for the constituency, what is happening to the street lights, is there a school being built, etc. Much of which is actually the job of the local municipal councillor or the panchayat person. So they take away the resources from parliamentary work to address these, because that's where the incentive structure is. A second issue is, even if they are interested, and many of them are, in taking up issues against, to hold the government accountable, and if there is a vote on any of these issues, there is a very strong pressure to toe the party line, including the anti-defection law, which is in some sense unique to India among all the larger democracies. So under the anti-defection law, an MP cannot vote against the party whip, and the cost of voting against the party whip is that the MP loses his or her seat in Parliament. So it's a very strong law, and very few people ever buck that. So that takes away the incentive for them to do that. So again, coming back, these could be the issues for us to address in how to strengthen Parliament, to make them a body which can hold government better accountable. To sum up, I would say research staff, office space for MPs, in fact amending the anti-defection law so that it applies only to confidence motions, so that there is free vote on other issues, asking them questions on what they do in Parliament, engaging with them right through, not just once in 5 years, but right through the term, pointing to them what are your, as a voter, what are our issues and viewpoints, including on various bills, so that they can take them up. So it's extremely important as citizens for us to continually engage with parliamentarians so that they can raise their issue and hold the government more accountable.